Welcome back, Gadgeteers. So I wanted to do another video on the MacBook Air M1 that I recently purchased. If you haven't seen the previous video, you may want to go check it out. It's an unboxing. If you've seen an unboxing video, you really don't have too much to worry about. You pretty much know what's going on. But I wanted to show you the MacBook Air, how I've been using it. I've only had it for about a week, but I was pleased to find that a lot of the open source programs that I use, I can go ahead and put right on this system. So about a year ago, I bought a Yoga 6. It's a 5700 Ryzen 7 processor. It has 16 gigabytes of memory and 512 gigabytes of storage. This particular system has 8 gigabytes of memory and 256 gigabytes of storage. So really it would be more useful as a day-to-day machine. I just bought it to experiment with and do things in the MacBook ecosystem. So let's talk about that. I'm happy with the chassis, of course. The ports are lacking. That is nothing new. The processor, the M1, is surprisingly good. I'm actually impressed. But when you compare it to that 5700 Ryzen 7 I've got, it is lacking. So how did I compare it? Well, I was able to download and install Kdenlive. And the video that you were watching in the background, this one right here, was actually produced on Kdenlive on this system here. So production was fine. There was no hesitation or skipping or anything odd when I was watching the clips. I was actually impressed. The cool thing, these video clips that I have in here are actually 4K from my 4K camera. But as you can see here on the title, I'm rendering it down to HD 1080p. So I don't know if that made it easier for the system to show these 4K clips or not, but it really was decent. One of the things that is a problem is with the M1 processor. It is Apple Silicon, and as such, it does not run the x86 core instruction set. So what does that mean? Well, it means that you have to have a program called Rosetta, which is an interpretation layer between the native Apple Silicon instruction set and the x86 instruction set, where in this case, Kdenlive was produced. So Kdenlive only uses the x86 instruction set. So the first program you install that uses x86, Apple will tell you that it requires Rosetta and asks you if you want to install it. Well, I went ahead and said yes, and I was very happy with it. However, one of the downsides is in rendering. So I took this video and I took all the source here, including the Kdenlive file, and I went ahead and transferred all of that to my Lenovo Yoga. So I ran the Yoga and it produced a rendered video in about 21 minutes. The Mac produced a rendered video in 34 minutes. So there was quite a difference. That is a downside. You know, this definitely wouldn't be a mainstay for editing. There's just limitations to it. But if it's all I had and I was on the go, absolutely this could render a video. This one that we did, the last one, was, I believe, 21 minutes. So, you know, it took 34 minutes to render it, but it is able to render a shorter video. I wouldn't want to use this to render videos that were more than 30 minutes. Keep it basic, 1080p. I'm not even going to attempt 4K. Also, I used H.264 as my compression, not H.265. H.265 would take even longer, but the file would be smaller. Really not worth it to do H.265 for a 30-minute video here. The 21-minute video ended up being about 700 megabytes, so the upload didn't take very long at all to send it over to YouTube. Not a problem. So given that there's only 8 gigabytes of memory on this system, I was actually really impressed by how well it responded. I think it's probably using the SSD storage, you know, kind of as a swap, if you will, just like the old systems used, you know, back in the day when we had conventional hard drives. If something had to be sent to a swap file on a conventional hard drive, it was terrible. It would take forever to get it back out of swap. The SSD is a little bit faster, so my theory is you don't notice it quite as much. However, I want you to see the memory consumption on this thing. Tell me what you think. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. So I've got Kdenlive running, and that's using up a gigabyte of RAM. OBS Studio, not really a ton, about 250 megabytes of RAM. So it varies a little bit. But if you come down here, it says the physical memory is 8 gigabytes. The memory used is 6.5 gigabytes approximately. So cached files, we see 1.5 gigabytes there. I initially thought it meant that it was written to swap, but that is not the case. The swap is right now at 0 bytes. So it does appear that some of the files, and I don't know which ones, you know, possibly the Kdenlive data files and probably some system files have been put into swap. So the system is just very quick. Everything that I do on it responds quickly. I haven't noticed an issue where it doesn't. Let's run top. Top seems to agree with the activity monitor, the graphical one. One thing that does surprise me, I want you to check this out. So I'm going to go to Kdenlive, the biggest memory eater. I'm going to go ahead and close it. Don't want to save because I'm already done with that. And let's bring up Activity Monitor again. Okay, so Kdenlive has shut down. OBS Studio is still running and making a recording. Got the Brave browser running. Did not know VLC was running. 120 megabytes, not that large. So 8 gigabytes total physical memory, but it's saying I have 5.76 gigabytes in use. I assume that accounts also for the 1.5 gigabytes of cached files. And I don't really understand the compressed memory. If there's anybody out there that is a Mac aficionado or understands the Mac operating system, let me know what this means. I mean, technically, I guess it means, you know, just like the old compression for hard drives that we used to do years ago, that somehow it's compressing certain applications, programs, or data files to try to make them fit in a smaller space. It's the only thing I can think of. The other thing I'm not sure about is wired memory. Different terms, not something I'm used to. I think the cached files really make a difference on this system, why it's so peppy. It does not act like a system with 8 gigabytes. Everything that runs on here runs really well, and that's one of the things that Mac OS does extremely well is it does not act like a system with 8 gigabytes. My wife and I use LibreOffice to send documents back and forth, and to some extent for other uses. One of the ones that I get nervous about is when you're doing a resume though. But from my experience, any document that's created in Libre opens up nearly the same or perfect in Microsoft Word. But when you send a Word document to LibreOffice, it gets scrambled. It's almost as if Microsoft did something in their document, put some code in there to deliberately make it scramble on any other word processor except for Word. Very frustrating. So some good open source software. I'm running OBS right now. I don't have a whole lot on this yet. Of course, I've got Firefox, another open source package. I have, and it depends how you feel about this, Brave browser. As far as I know, it is built on open source, but I don't know if it's fully open source. I really think it may be, but I'm not really sure. But anyway, I've been using Brave for some time. I have it on pretty much all of my systems. So from the MacBook to my Lenovo Yoga 6, my desktop system, my tablet, my iPhone, pretty much everything. I really like it. I don't know if you guys have done this yet, but you can create a sync code, and then you can pass that code to all your systems, so that if you create a bookmark, you would then be able to have it available on all of your synced devices. So most of the stuff that's Apple related, I hate Safari. They do have their applications, Office type applications. Well, I don't think I installed the other. How do I get back to... There we go. That was odd. Let's see. Yeah, they have Numbers, Pages, Keynote, Podcasts. Not really an Office product. But I really just don't have a use for this. Honestly, I don't have a use for GarageBand. One or two times I made an iMovie video. It's kind of just trying to get it done. It's okay, but it kind of frustrates me because I'm so used to Kdenlive. What else we got on here? Oh, Proton VPN. I don't know if you use a VPN. It's probably a good idea. It really depends what you're doing, but the whole reason Proton came to light was because of Proton Mail, which is encrypted mail that nobody, not even the owners of the Proton system, can get into. So if you lose your password for your Proton Mail, you're never going to get into it again. The idea was, if you were a researcher and you were doing research on a sensitive subject, maybe you're a PhD or whatever, and you're from China, and the research you're doing is not sanctioned by your government. Not only not sanctioned, you could lose your life if you were doing it. So Proton Mail came about so documents could be passed back and forth for research purposes, but nobody would be able to get into it. That's the theory. And then Proton VPN came out, and it makes sense that if you're using Proton Mail, you wouldn't necessarily want your government to know that you were going to Proton Mail and trying to conceal something from them. So you use a VPN. It could be any VPN. Mine just happens to be Proton VPN. And the rest of the stuff on here is the usual. There's so many things on here I simply don't use that I probably should get rid of. All right, Mark from the future here. As promised, I wanted to discuss the quite amazing render times I got on my test video and the Sonoma upgrade. So what interests me most is you can see if you have one of these MacBook Air 13-inch 2015 i5 dual cores, if you tried to render the video that I rendered, and I rendered it into 1080p only, you can see it took an hour and 38 minutes, a little plus. The MacBook Air 13-inch 2020 with the M1 quad core, pretty sure it's 4 performance cores and 4 efficiency cores. I didn't check, so if somebody knows for sure, go ahead and post a comment. 34 minutes versus an hour and 38 minutes. That is absolutely crazy. My Lenovo Yoga 6 laptop with a Ryzen 7 5700U, 21 minutes, 54 seconds. And finally, the MacBook Pro 3 processor came in at 16 minutes, 41 seconds, which is excellent. You may wonder how I got my hands on one of these, and I'm going to discuss that in a later video, so I hope you stay tuned. I don't know why I didn't do it, but I didn't time exactly the MacBook Air 13-inch upgrade to Sonoma, but I guesstimate, and I feel I'm probably pretty close, to 1 hour 30 minutes for the older MacBook Air, and for the newer 2020 M1, 38 minutes. How can I have 38 minutes 60 seconds? Wouldn't that be 39 minutes? My math these days. So my point here isn't to show that you need to get a new machine or, run out and get something brand new like an MacBook Pro 3 or a Ryzen Yoga 6, but now they're up to Yoga 7 and more. This is still a great computer. Most people aren't going to be concerned about rendering videos that are 24 minutes, 30 minutes. They're going to be using it for a lot of other things, but if you wanted to, you could go ahead and do that, and it would be functional. Got to wait a little bit longer than the competition, but yeah, it's a great entry-level MacBook. All right, well, that's about all I have for you. With regard to these questions, that's the only thing I'm really not clear on. The wired memory and the compressed. I think I get the compressed. I did see some data go to swap when I was really pushing it. Recap, the processor is not as good as other laptops. I would have, if I could have had this exact chassis, because I like that kind of beveled, thinning look. And it had an M2 and 16 gigabytes of memory and 512 gigabytes of storage, and didn't cost an arm and a leg, I probably would have been interested. The only way you can get a MacBook Air that has those is if you buy the 15-inch MacBook Air, and that's $1,600. I've got a much better computer I'm running Linux on, that Yoga 6, that did not cost nearly that amount of money. And so I just don't see a point. If you're somebody who doesn't have a lot of money, which is pretty much most of us anymore, I would definitely not run out and purchase one of these. As a matter of fact, the Lenovo Yoga 6 is still for sale. It has the Ryzen 7, something like the 7750U processor. Mine is the 5700U. And it's $999. You get a lot of hardware for that. Maybe you don't want to use Linux. You can just leave Windows on there. Maybe you're not sure, so you could do what I did. I was sure, but I always do it anyway. I create a dual boot, Linux and Windows. You never know when it's nice to have Windows to do something for compatibility reasons or whatever. So I don't wipe Windows from my system. I just give it a tiny 100 gigabyte partition. Just have the OS installed, very basic. Then all the meat and potatoes are in my Linux, on my Linux partition, the rest of the drive. All right, I believe that's all I've got for you. I hope to hear from you, and I hope you enjoyed the video. And until next time, thank you for watching.